It feels really lonely when my partner emotionally shuts down to me. What should I do?
Well, loneliness is not an easy feeling. And I always suggest with loneliness or any other feelings of life like that, heartbreak, grief, helplessness over others, that people first put their hands in their heart because this stimulates oxytocin, and that they bring in compassion for the loneliness, and they're very present with it. They don't judge it. And then they look to, well, what can they do? Do they need to make more friends? Do they need to reach out? Do they need to explore, like I said before, with their partner, is why is their partner withdrawn? What's going on in the system between them that's leading to the withdrawal? Because almost always, like I said, there's somebody trying to control, somebody withdrawing, resisting that control, and that there's a lot that they can do if they begin to understand that.
Why don't I feel more compassion and empathy for others?
That's a very good question. It's very unfortunate in our society that people don't role model and teach this more. I think I read about in one of the Scandinavian cultures, I think maybe it was Denmark, where they actually teach it from the elementary schools on up. But, I mean, there are people that are born having a lot of compassion, having a lot of empathy. I mean, I was like that from the time I was born. I didn't have to be taught it. But there's other people that do have to be taught it. And if they don't learn it in their families, if they don't see it in their families, that unfortunately becomes very difficult for them. Compassion is not a feeling that we generate in our own being. It's something we open to. Compassion is one of the gifts of spirit. And when we're really open to learning about loving ourselves and sharing our love, and we're open to our spiritual connection, we can learn to bring that compassion in. But if you don't feel compassion for yourself, it's unlikely that you're going to be able to feel compassion for others. And so with the inner bonding process that we do teach people to learn to have compassion and empathy for themselves so that then they can extend that out.
What should a man or woman do who has a partner that constantly pulls on them for attention and approval?
Well, one of the things that I tell people is that we attract people at our common level of woundedness, which means our common level of self-abandonment or our common level of self-love. So, either we're attracting out of woundedness or we're attracting out of health. And that depends on whether or not we're taking loving care of ourselves. And so a partner that's pulling on you is coming from a lot of self-abandonment. They're not learning to love themselves. They're not filling themselves up with love. And it's likely that at the other end of that, you also have those things going on, where you're not being in compassion for yourself, you're not taking loving care of yourself, you're not perhaps speaking up to a partner who's pulling on you and saying, it seems like you want something from me. I'm wondering what it is that you're needing. We need to talk about what's happening because it's not feeling good to me. It feels like you're making me responsible for you. I'd like to understand what's happening. But that can only happen when that person is taking responsibility for themselves. Otherwise, if one person is pulling, the other person is likely to resist and withdraw. And so that's the other end of the system, where you're talking about, what to do with the withdrawn partner. The other end of that is that one partner is pulling.
What should a woman or man do who has a partner who resists everything you say to them?
Yeah, and so yes, that's the same thing. I mean, resistance, withdrawal, these are ways that the wounded part of us has learned to protect against being controlled, being used, being drained by the other person. So if we have somebody who's pulling on us or trying to control us, and we don't know how to take care of ourselves in the face of that, we're going to go into resistance and withdrawal in the face of that.
How do you know if you should leave a relationship or stay and work on it?
I suggest to people that unless there's physical abuse, sexual abuse, intense emotional abuse, that they hang in there because they're in a system and they're an equal part of the system. And if they just leave blaming the other person for the system, they're going to take with them their part of the system, and they're going to recreate in the next relationship the same problems. I've seen this over and over again because I've been working with couples over 52 years. I've seen people through 2, 3, 4 relationships do the same thing. They think that each time they meet somebody it's completely different, but because they're taking themselves with them, they're creating the same system. So obviously, if it's abusive, physically abusive, emotionally abusive, sexually abusive, then you need to leave. But other than that, hang in there, do your inner work, and see what happens.